But now, like, the turnaround is that we talked about so much, like, ick for MVCI. Now, all of a sudden, the game starts to get, like, popular. Why? And it is because of this. Marvel vs. Capcom has been getting a lot of limelight recently, and it's because someone by the name of Rin, or at Twitter, Wistful Hopes. She is a game developer and a artist. This was like debuted on like May 4th, right? So like literally 4 days ago. She's been experimenting with the models of Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite to look like this. Characters would have a cell shading black outline, sort of like Marvel vs. Capcom 3 style in MVCI. Just like the in-game models look very like crisp, like holy shit, is this Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite? Oh my god, it looks so crazy. It looks so crazy that it looks like this. And there are like more updates to this graphical feature. Venom looks super fucking sick with like the highlights and like in the tones, the very like resembling the Spider-Man animated series Venom, without how like the colors like interact and whatnot. My man Jeddah, now with like the whirling pool of like death, that was like one of his like specials, but Jeddah looks absolutely godlike with the cell shading feature. Spider-Man looks dope. Zero looks dope. We get like some examples of like the characters in motion, as well as like changing some things in the background and like in the stages with the cell shading feature. Oops. But game of like how it looks in motion looks really like dope. Sure you can. So it's really sick of how she's like doing like some impossible looking stuff, you know? It's crazy. And what's even better is that a lot of people really are liking MVCI now. A lot of people are really liking MVCI now, and it's wild. I, of course, like, you know, love the shit out of just like a small like mod. And first of all, it's a mod. We're no stranger to mods before, like Marvel vs. Capcom 3 with the palette swaps, / clone engines of adding more characters than what the game originally has. So we're no strangers to this. But this is a person, a modder, you know, doing like a graphical update even like Capcom is like not doing. Fans have more time than like an actual company with less like budget, you know? So it's crazy to see this, which kind of like brings up like a discussion, and that is, you know, this is like the big ultimate like discussion, and that I want to have with people, is that graphics matter in a fighting game. Graphics absolutely have the most casual effect, you know, of course, on like a casual, to either bring them in or take them out of a fighting game. And of course, MVCI was especially like one of them. Art style matters, exactly. Just again, a simple change up in like tones for MVCI, a game that got like so much hate for the bland Unreal Engine like looks. now is actually looking like it has identity now. Now it actually looks like, you know, a game that's like worthy of the Marvel vs. Capcom plate. Nowadays we have like games because of Unreal Engine, where there's a lot of like emphasis to make it more associative to real time, right? Now we have effects like ray tracing, we have graphical fidelities, FXAA, like all the shit that goes on in the RE engine, right? With Resident Evil and Street Fighter 6, you know, those people. And that's of course cool, right? We are in the age where games are games are closely similar to like real life with the advancements of graphical updates. Fighting games especially, right? They have gotten way more realistic and way more prettier than what they were like originally when they were just like pixels on a screen. Now you look at games like Street Fighter 6 and Mortal Kombat 1, the characters look almost close to like real people. Well, not Street Fighter 6, of course, because it's a more fictional world, but Mortal Kombat almost looks like they're real people. Of course, you know, Megan Fox, bad acting, but Nitara closely looks like Megan Fox, so it's a surreal experience. However, especially like for a fighting game, and I will say this, and the chat has mentioned it, right? Mentioned it or phrased it, coined it a little bit. The Khaiza prefers like game feel, right? Or just like the raw gameplay experience of a like fighting game. Remember how I was like talking about Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite, and I was like the only one that was like putting up my PS4 and just playing MVCI, and if anybody wants to play, you know, play with me. I dig that. Nobody wanted to play MVCI like in that room. Of course, everybody's like different, so I can't just like force them to like play or ask them, you know, but Arthur enjoyers rise up, you know? But I love like fighting games that just have like a raw, visceral like gameplay element or gameplay loop to them. I love like the feeling of Marvel vs. Capcom gameplay where I can just like sit down and just like go to like training mode and be a lab fiend and discover a lot of like the crazy things that you can do with certain character combinations. And of course, you know, Space Stone and of course all the Infinity Stones definitely boosted that up a bit. So, and this is like, you know, resonates with like my origin for fighting games. I love Capcom versus games, even though I suck ass at playing them online, but I just love like assist-based fighters for just like the raw, chaotic fun and the endless learning, to quote MVCI, infinite possibilities that you have with Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite. But that does not resonate with a lot of other folks that want to like get into like fighting games, right? Because again, you know, art style sells, graphics sell, right? That is the, as like Nightbot would say, the casuals, right? The casuals are more attracted into how a game looks. And unfortunately so, Marvel vs. Capcom did not meet that like criteria. If a game can like sell me through like gameplay like loop, then I will enjoy that game more and more. And the Khaiza had experience with like, you know, pretty as hell graphics, but they don't like attach to me all too well, right? A couple of examples that I have felt was like, you know, the opposite spectrum where like, yo, graphics are really nice, but the gameplay is kind of like mid in comparison. Grand Blue Fantasy Versus. an Arc System Works game that really has polished up anime as fuck characters. But the time that I played it, and this was like in the beta, I did not have like a fun experience. Light, medium, heavy loops, and you would just get like the same combo over and over again. And it got a little bit better with Rising, right? It got a little bit better because with the Rising update, everyone gets like Street Fighter 6 mechanics. They got like drive, impact, and they got like drive, rush combos instilled into them. So the game's a little bit better, but I remember the ye olde days of vanilla Rising where like, yo, the game looks cool. These are cool like anime as hell characters in an anime as hell world. They play like shit. I would see like combo videos from like Persona Entertainment, lots of weird, crazy like stuff that that person would like do. Mostly just relegates down to like 50%, and that's not on the fault of like, well, I mean, it is kind of like on the fault of the game itself, because Grand Blue Fantasy Versus was made as a Street Fighter 6 clone. Because Street Fighter 5 was still like coming out, and so when Grand Blue Fantasy Versus was coming out, they wanted to make it like very grounded, very like you have to put your feet like on the cement and play like very lame, just teaching you very fighting game fundamental aspects, footsies, tick throws, you know, counters, dodges, right? So very Street Fighter 5 inspired. Another example is Dragon Ball FighterZ in Season 1. And yes, I know, like, it's an assist-based fighter, so Khaiza, aren't you contradicting yourself? But I remember back in like Season 1, where like the game is not as fleshed out as it is now with all of like the DLC and like the intense like battle balance updates that happened across the board for the rest of the roster. But I remember back in the day that like Dragon Ball FighterZ was not that fun to watch, nor was it like to play. One of them was like, you know, the online, right? Online for Dragon Ball FighterZ was pretty ass. So, and of course, like the constant like rage quitters because of the casual appeal of Dragon Ball FighterZ. So many rage quits happened on that game to a lot of like streamers that it became like, you know, a very miser. And the game itself, like I said, very Marvel vs. Capcom 3-esque. So you see like a lot of like similarities to, you know, certain top tier characters, palettes swapped over into Dragon Ball characters. X Factor is like one of them. There were not a lot of defensive options, nor any interesting offensive options to Dragon Ball FighterZ. So it was very painful to look at. Yeah, mommy. Okay, so just returned from dinner. Oh yeah, what were we talking about? Oh yeah, right. Games with like great graphical fidelity, great art style, but very subpar gameplay. Like Dragon Ball FighterZ like Season 1. Yes, we need some tea. Yeah, there are like a lot of games that have really good like graphical fidelity, but just kind of like play like ass, you know? So it's in like in that age that we gotta sell fighting games by making like a cool either art style or going full ham on Unreal Engine and other like fighting games, right? You know, whereas like I'm like, again, the opposite, you know, fighting games I feel like are at their peak when they don't look so great, but they play like amazing. I'm always down for always like the nutty jank, the creative endless possibilities that a fighting game can offer. Very astute. If I can mod it in, +5. Exactly. That's the thing, you could like mod it in. And we have mods like that exist. And I sort of like grew attached to like, you know, games that can be, you know, very like low budget, but can like play very well. a couple of examples, and I had like this example in mind in preparation for this discussion. A game that's like made by I think like 1 or 2 people, existing franchise, but has made like a small like little fighting game out of it, Among Us Arena. I was super jazzed about Among Us Arena because of, even though it's like a 1v1 like fighting game and there were no like unique characters in that roster, you could only pick like different like colors, technically like characters, but I love like the stupid like jank gimmick that Among Us Arena really had. I discovered a lot of dank shit in that fucking fighting game, like 50% combos, like doing like throws. It was like jank and there were inputs that were very unresponsive, sure, but I just felt like a raw, unadulterated fun for playing like Among Us Arena. Hell, I tell this to a lot of like my friends, right? My experience with Among Us Arena. I was a pantheon in that fucking fighting game. I had like a 10 game like kill streak, 10 game win streak in Among Us Arena. And ultimately, and this is like my friend's response, I killed that game. I killed that game, bro. The game is still running. I'm pretty sure there are like a lot of new updates. You ruined the experience for those kids. Yeah, I was like super down with like Among Us Arena, and I was super enthralled by just the jank but very fun gameplay loop of what you can do in Among Us. You had like ground bounce loops with the Among Us like fist. You had like knife loops like in the air. So it was hella amazing. And I was really like good at that game. I did like a 10 game like kill streak until, you know, like the game's like inputs, and I was like tired on that day. So I was like, nah, not today. I know it got more updates, like it has like a super meter now. So you can actually do big ass like ultra moves, a lot of that shit. To me, my peak example of like a very like low budget, not very graphical like fighting game like nowadays modern fighting games, but just have a very fun addictive gameplay loop that I could keep going back to, and I have loads of like fun. So yeah, I'm like one of those like types where it's like gameplay is fun. Gameplay is what matters like to me. Graphics is like secondary. And luckily enough, right, fighting games have progressed enough where they have like this middle ground now. Now you have fighting games like Street Fighter, like Tekken, like Mortal Kombat, also Guilty Gear Strive, that not only play great, even though I made like a Guilty Gear Strive, like, you know, my real thoughts on it. Like, of course, you know, the game is fun. Just wish there was like more stuff that like you can do, but still it's like a fun experience. Fun like fighting game, sorry. Like, gameplay is good, but also the graphics look good. So you got like this cool like cool middleman about fighting games now. Back then it was either one way or the hard way. You know, now is unfortunately so. Like games, very like good games, like, you know, of course MVCI. There's also Killer Instinct that has a really good gameplay mechanic with combo breakers and all that jazz. Is not looked favorably upon unless you're a Killer Instinct fan, but the graphics are like, they're like meh in comparison, you know? It's not like a big 3 or like the big 5. And this segues into like Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite because, you know, now a lot of people are liking the quote-unquote art style of MVCI, where we all know well back in the day that like not many people bought, owned, or have played MVCI because the graphics looked bad. And that's once again to, you know, go back in this circle. Graphics and art style are unfortunately what really matters to the casual player base of video games, right? They can like get like a fighting game, they can get like a cool as hell looking video game, but it will play like ass. going back into like Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite, they're like now a lot of people praising like the art style, even though it's like a simple like polish up, but like there are those that haven't like got it or played the game, you know, for, you know, what it's like really worth, because they were toned down, because they were turned off by the hideous as fuck graphics in MVCI, right? I'm not saying that, you know, don't give praise for MVCI, or, you know, I'm not like, well, technically I'm like calling out, but, right, there are like those that have like, can like spit like bars, but not really have like played it, and I'm like, I can like vouch for it because, you know, I have played MVCI, right? I've got all the way to like 10th rank in MVCI, and then I stopped because, you know, the game's getting a lot faster, and my small ass brain can't keep up with the very sweaty MVCI players, right? But, you know, I still played my worst of MVCI. It's still fun. I still think of MVCI like lab combos, you know, to this day. I still think of my times playing online to this day, right? MVCI is a fun game, right? Deep down, it is a fun, like, very intrinsic, very cool looking fighting game. It's just, it gets turned off by so many people because of the way it like looks. Once again, I'm not like, you know, dissing on the people that, you know, now like MVCI. More so, I like that more people are liking MVCI now more than ever because of, you know, a simple like little modding slash polish up can definitely change a lot of people's perspective on said like fighting game. But it's also the fact that, like, you know, yeah, people are like praising MVCI, but have you played it back in the day? Have you tried like Space Stone or Reality Stone? No, you haven't. Then, oh boy. But yeah, that's like the whole like shtick I have. My honest to god like thoughts of MVCI, right? I'm glad that it's getting like this polish up, but never forget like the history of MVCI. Never forget like the amount of the enormous amount of like hatred and spite that it carried over the years from beginning to post like launch. You know, everybody was at a time an MVCI hater, and look what happened. A little like turnaround, game polishes up to look like this, and now suddenly everybody's a Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite fan. Suddenly we became an Infinite fan. So just know like where you're like coming from.